My name's Adam McLaughlin, and this is the Church Marketing Ideas Podcast. Practical ideas to help your church build trust in your community. Welcome to the Church Marketing Ideas Podcast, episode 11, Confession Time. Matt Morrison is on today. I don't know if you've noticed this about me, but I'm Canadian. And I didn't realize this until just now, but Matt is also Canadian. When I'm getting ready to read his pre-roll, the bio for the interview, I realized that he lives on Vancouver Island on the west coast of Canada. So, hey, shout out to all of our Canadian listeners. Do me a favor. If you're a Canadian listener, take a screenshot of the podcast and tag us on either Twitter or Instagram at CMI Podcast. Let me know you're a Canadian listener. Gotta stick with Canada, gotta stick together. There's only a few of us up here and we're cold. We gotta stay together to stay warm. So, hey, if you're a Canadian, you're listening to the podcast, then tag us at CMI Podcast and let us know. Otherwise, if you're not Canadian, you're still welcome to listen. And I know you're gonna love this interview with Matt Morrison talking about websites for your churches. Now, at the end of every podcast, we answer a question from one of our listeners. And today a listener asked a question about what questions should be asked during a church communications job interview. So you'll want to listen to the end of the podcast to hear my answer to that question. What should we be asking during a church communications job interview? I'm really excited to have Matt Morrison on the show today. Matt is the director of Tithely Sites and joined their team this past year. With 10 years of experience helping churches create websites, Matt has a passion to help them reach more people with the life-changing message of Jesus. Matt and his wife Chelsea live in Canada on Vancouver Island with their 3 children, Emma, Aubrey, and Brock. After this word from our sponsors, my interview with Matt Morrison. Hey, Tyler, just tell us a little bit about what the Engage Conference is all about.
So the Engage Conference is an online, completely free conference that we put together to help church leaders navigate the technology that is so necessary in today's world. But what we're finding is so many churches just lack the resources, the time, the energy, the money to be able to navigate all of the technology that's just so imperative for us to be able to reach people. And so we've brought some of the best minds in the church space and the technology space all coming together so that we can focus right around how do you implement technology inside the church so that you can reach more people in your community.
Perfect. Our listeners can sign up for free to the Engage Conference at churchmarketingideas.com/engage. Thanks, Tyler. Matt, thank you so much for hanging out with me on the podcast today.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so for our listeners who may not know, just give us a little bit of update on where you're at right now and what you're up to.
Yeah, sounds good. So I, way back when, would be back in 2010, founded a company called Ascend. That specifically helped churches with websites. We can kind of dive into all the fun stuff that involved, but fast forward to this past summer, we actually, my whole team came on board with the team at Tithely, and just this past month have launched Tithely Sites, which we are pretty excited about.
So I'm looking forward to talk all about church websites. But I also want to find out, what is your take from the inside of Tithely? Because we see from the outside, and I'm sure a lot of my listeners know exactly who Tithely is and what they do, and we think about online giving platform, but it seems like there's so much more going on with Tithely now. So just give us your take from the inside.
Yeah, sounds good. I'd probably be a good person to speak to that because it's all been quite new for me. It was about, 7 months ago now that we officially came on board with Tithely, and you'll have to trust me that I am not coming from a biased opinion, and that I have been genuinely shocked at how amazing that culture is, how amazing that team is, just the things that Tithely's working on and has planned. Like, it is so kingdom first, and so that was a big part of it. Obviously, there's a lot that goes on with an acquisition and taking your company and kind of coming on board with a new team. I can safely say that it would not always have been the case that I would feel this comfortable saying, yeah, let's jump on board with these guys. But right from anyone that knows Dean and Frank and that crew there, it is so just focused on helping churches, doing everything we can. And that was a huge part of what my heart had been for years, was to say, we just want to get tools into these hands of these churches, because so many churches, whether they be small, medium, or large, have different challenges that they're trying to overcome. And so to be part of a system that's actually trying to help them and kind of work together as the church. And that vision is really something we saw with Tidely, and we were like, no, this is going to be a good fit. And so, it has been a lot of fun since day one. I think the team has like doubled in size this past year, which is really exciting. But there's so many good things happening in terms of just figuring out what those problems are that churches are coming up against. I'm sure a lot of the problems that your listeners would be facing, and we're thinking about them, and we're actually bringing teams together to solve those problems with some pretty exciting tools. And so, yeah, I'll definitely just say look out for this year, because there's some big things in the works.
Yes, and one of the new big things is Tidely websites. So give me a little bit of high-level overview, and then we're going to dig into some specifics about church websites. So somebody who does or doesn't use Tidely websites will still get a lot of value from this conversation. But just give me a high-level overview, because there's plenty of church website design builders. There's plenty of church website designers. What sets Tidely's websites apart?
Yeah, to probably best answer that question, I'll probably take you back to the start in terms of what was really the main focuses for me when we were building this platform out. And I think, before I even founded my company, Ascend, I was a website developer for just small and medium businesses, and was kind of happily working away when my church said, hey, can someone help us build the website? I was like, yeah, I'll build my church website. That'll be fun, a fun little side project. That turned out to be like 10 times more painful than any business website I'd built, because a business website's your about page, services, contact page, and you're on your way. And that website will last them 8 years. The week after I launched my church website, the secretary calls in and is like, but our sermon player has to do this, but our events calendar has to do this. And I was like, oh, this is painful. And then the next church calls me and says, can you do that for us too? And I'm like, yeah, but it's going to cost you like $15,000 because of the amount of time it took to build all those features a certain way. And I think I had 4 or 5 churches call me and say, can you do this for us? And I was like, these features are so specific to what a church needs and just the way you want them to work. And I was like, there's no easy way to do this. And then, of course, the light bulb moment was, if you're all asking for the same engine to be built, could we build this in such a way that all of a sudden every church could utilize it? And so it was really fun for us, because we kind of back in 2010 got those first 5 churches on board, and right away saw that benefit where we're like, hey, we can really cut down the costs for you by not having to reinvent the wheel. And I won't even take credit for this win, but the really cool part about it was all of a sudden 2-3 years in, when churches start asking for just kind of things to be revamped, or all of a sudden, a great example is mobile friendliness. All of a sudden now everyone wants their website to be mobile friendly in 2012, 2013. So we rewrite the front end to be responsive for iPads and phones. And we issue the update, and I think it was 80 churches at that time got a new responsive platform, but none of them paid for it. And I was like, this is the win right here, where all of a sudden we can be improving multiple church websites at one time, and no church has to foot that bill. And so it's pretty cool, because now 7 years after that, we have been issuing major upgrades. We just had a couple big releases this year, and all 600 sites on the platform got updated. None of them had to pay for it. None of them had to, do anything major. But we just said, no, in 2019, this is what a church website should be. And so this is where we're going to bring you. And so those same 5 churches in 2010, their websites just keep getting better, and they don't have to rebuild a website. They don't have to go back to the drawing board, pay another developer. And so we're making sure that the site does everything they need it to, from the sermon player, events calendar, ministry pages, permissions, all those different things. And we're just going to keep making it better in time. And so it's been really cool just to see that model take shape, where I kind of tell them, hey, this could be the last website you ever have to build, because in 2025, we're going to make sure it does everything a 2025 website should be.
It's incredible. And, 600 websites on the platform, and hopefully that number is continuing to grow even after we've recorded this podcast by the time it goes live. But I know that you've seen so much now, right? 600 websites, and you've got the experience. I would love to dig in a little bit to what you've experienced and what you've seen churches. But before we get there, help churches who are listening understand or get a fresh revelation that your website is what people are checking out before they come to your building. This is your first impression.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm sure a lot of visitors are kind of, you've heard this in different forms before. So some of this will be a refresher, but it just couldn't be more true, right? And then so many things we do, whether it's on our phones or on our computers at work or whatever, we just check things out online before we take the time to get our kids ready for church in the morning, before we take the time to get to drive there. We're going to check it out to make sure this thing's legitimate. And so I think we just can never undersell the value of making sure that our website is accurately representing who we are, and welcoming in that moment, that we're actually connecting with people to be able to say, hey, we want you to come here, and this is a bit of a taste of what you're going to see, and we're going to answer some of those main questions. It's funny, it's a lot better than it was when we first started, but there's still so many church websites that just don't do that. And I think often maybe the platform hasn't allowed them to do that, or they haven't really invested in it. But I mean, I can't imagine how many people come to these church websites that we all know about that just say, you know what, this doesn't really feel like the right place for me, because I feel like this might be a little bit dated, or I feel like this, they're still talking about their Christmas Eve service in February or whatever it would be, right? And so I think we just want to make sure that we're investing the right time in there, because that could be the difference in someone saying, yeah, you know what, let's go check this out.
So if I had a tattoo on my forehead, it would say consistency builds trust. And people watching the YouTube channel will know that that's not what's on my forehead. I don't have, but that's how much I believe in consistency. Tell me a little bit about the trouble or the problems that are created when your website doesn't accurately represent what your church experience is going to be like.
Yeah, definitely. So I think it's one of those things where people have you make certain decisions whenever you're putting anything together, which is the colors we're going to use, the photos we're going to use, the fonts we're going to use, even the template we're going to pick from. And I think when those decisions get made, you're setting a standard now for what's going to happen when someone actually shows up on a Sunday morning. And you're also going to attract a certain type of person. You're going to draw people with an expectation that this is what's going to be there. And so, you're exactly right. Consistency is the key here, to make sure that we follow that path, so that it's a just seamless experience. And I show up and that's like, hey, I recognize that guy from the website, or I walk into the sanctuary and we saw that video where they showed their sanctuary. And it's funny, it's not even necessarily that they're going to express those words, but there's a comfort in knowing this is what I saw when I came to the website, and and this is still happening here. So I can trust that the message they said on their headline, that's also probably true, is that they care about people, they care about me. And they want me here this morning. And so I think just getting those different pieces, it's worth the time and effort. It does take a little bit of extra time, right? And I think probably one of the best areas to focus on when it comes to your website would be your photography. It might be someone at the church who maybe has some photography experience. Maybe it's worth contracting someone, or maybe you yourself have a nice camera, or you've got your iPhone 11 that you can take out and take some nice shots. That makes such a difference. So I would say that over the last few years, that's been one of the biggest pieces we've seen separate the great websites from the poor ones, is just the quality of photography. It's amazing how it can just set the tone for, okay, there's something here, this is quality. Whereas if you just have lots of text, or you're depending on the styling of that text to really draw people in, it's just hard to really engage. We all scan websites, whether we realize it or not. We're headline readers. And so, the pictures can speak 1,000 words of what you're trying to say.
So photography would be the number one thing that we need to get right on our church website. What would you rank, or what would your philosophy be on what's number two? What is the next most important thing that we need to make sure is on our church website?
I'm going to kind of put two things together here. So one is just a really, really clear message. So not trying to say too much all the time, because I think often in churches we have a lot of voices, whether it's our council members, our boards, our other staff, our ministry leaders saying, I need you to say this. And I think that's where you end up with what I call kind of the Yahoo effect, where yahoo.com had every single possible option on their front page, and Yahoo is now basically no more. Google won because they kept it really simple with a single task. So for you, it might be saying, okay, on our homepage, what is our one clear message? On our I'm new here page, what's our one clear message? When they hit this ministry page, the youth group page, what's the one clear message? And so making sure that things feel really simple, so you're not trying to throw too much of them, because I think often the more we say, the less they actually hear, because there's too much noise happening. And so I think in that, getting a really clear message, like, who are we as a church? What's our invitation to someone, which might be, we have a seat saved for you, or God loves you and so do we, and we'd love to see you this Sunday morning. It could be so simple. But often the most challenging part of that isn't always coming up with the message. It's taking stuff away because you feel like you're hurting someone's feelings who wrote all these paragraphs, and I can't just delete them. Yes, you can. I give you permission right now. Tell them to come after me if they get upset with you. Simplicity is so important to making something just feel welcoming, because one really important thing to do on your website, when you're setting it up, or even if you're kind of evaluating your current site, is to say, what do we want this website to do? And you figure out who's coming to your site. So that's an interesting church conversation. Is this website for visitors, or is this website for our existing congregation, or is there a way we can serve both those groups, maybe in very specific ways? But then once we establish that, we're like, well, what do they want to do? They want to find out what time the service is at. They want to know whether or not there's childcare available on a Sunday morning. They want to know if they should be dressed a certain way. And so we kind of figure out their goals, or maybe, take that further. They're trying to connect. They want to let you know that they came on Sunday and they're trying to connect in because they want to join a small group or join team or whatever it would be. And so once you establish those goals, you say, okay, those are the, let's say, 5 most important things that can happen on our website. Those are their next steps. And now we line the website up to match those next steps. That comes down to our navigation item to say contact, or, I'm new here, or services, or whatever it would be. But once you've got your goals, now you say, now how do we follow that path so they get there? And then the bad news for the person who wrote all those paragraphs is if the rest of those paragraphs don't line up with those goals, we need to just get rid of them or tuck them away somewhere or whatever it would be, but get them out of the way of those main things. Because if we can make these the focus, then people are actually going to get through and accomplish those tasks.
So you touched on something there, and I want to dig in a little bit more. The philosophy that a website is either for somebody who's new, who might be looking for information for the church, but also a resource for people who are part of your church who are looking for things like details on events, or, how do I get so-and-so's email address who's on staff? Is this universal? Is there a universal philosophy here? Is there a universal truth as far as the purpose of your website? Does it depend? And how do you make that decision, or how do you craft that story?
Yeah, I think it is a really interesting challenge as churches face. And you see some churches go extremes one way or the other, where some churches have said, you know what? We don't go to our website, or we don't see new people coming through the door. So therefore our website is only for our existing congregation. And you're like, oh, that's so flawed, because you're not going to draw anyone if you don't make it welcoming, if you don't put that person first. And then vice versa. I see a lot of churches who just say, you know what, our website is only for the newcomer. Our existing congregation members, we've got some tools they can use, whether it's church management systems or whatever, which absolutely serve purposes, but maybe there's ways we can kind of work both together. And that's what I think has worked best, because I think when you think about things that would be more for the existing congregation member, your events calendar, your sermons, your even details about your ministries, I think those things still hold both value for both parties. Because yes, you want I talked about your really simple messaging for the newcomer. I think once they get past those things, they might be a researcher. That might be their personality type, where they want to dig in and find out more about you. So your events coming up, that you do a soup and sandwich this Saturday morning, that you have something for a youth group coming up next Wednesday, those are hugely important. And I just saw this past week on a church website where they hid their event section. There's nowhere to be found. And I thought, I want to know what's happening, because I've got a teenager, and that teenager needs to be able to go to a youth group. And I don't know if you have one because you've hidden your events page. Or, you know what, a really big piece for me is your teaching on Sunday morning, and I want to hear it. So if you don't put your sermons up there, then I can't understand, or I'm not going to know what to expect on a Sunday, whether or not this teaching really fits the style that I best learn from, or that I'm most excited about. And so I think getting those different pieces up there can serve both really well. I think I completely understand the making your website for your visitor. I think what you can do is maybe just also have the other pieces for existing congregation members. So, a really big introduction, a really nice warm welcome on the homepage, clearly directing people to what more information if you're new, but then also having some navigation items saying ministries, events, sermons. There's nothing wrong with that too.
Okay, so I'm going to push a button here, and I already know how you're going to answer, but we need a slider on the homepage so we can talk about all the events going on in the next 27 weeks at our church. What if somebody visits and they can't find the youth? So we should put them on the homepage. And what if somebody visits and they don't know you should click the kids button at the top. So we should put information about the kids on the homepage. Where does it stop, Matt? Where does it end?
Exactly. No, it's got to be one of the single biggest challenges of just church communication in general is how to say no to people. And I think you just have to, I think where it maybe starts rather than figuring out where it ends, because hopefully we can stop it right at the beginning, is setting that really clear vision for what the front of your homepage is. And so I would imagine church sliders were birthed out of 4 people hovering over the administrator saying, I want my thing at the top. I want my thing at the top. And what if we just did a slideshow and you can all be at the top? That's probably where something like that is where it came up. And I think we all know, the stats on sliders are very well known that people just don't watch them. I'm sad to admit in 2010, we had some sliders on our websites. But it's exactly it. You don't get the engagement you're looking for because there's too many things for people to look through. They don't sit there and wait. And so there's new ways to communicate that same information. There's other ways we can get there. And I think when you set up those goals and have that really clear system in place for, this is what our homepage is, this is what the top half or maybe the top few sections are all about the visitor, that's how you can answer that person who says, I want my thing at the top. You're like, you know what? We've got your event listed in the calendar. You're clearly listed on the ministries, and we're going to put it right on that ministries page. And so if someone wants to know about that, they'll get there. And then, there's other things you do. Hey, we'll give you a social media post. Maybe that's the new equivalent of, don't worry, we'll get you out there. It's just that we're not going to give up that sacred space. I guarantee you, the Google offices, every new product they came out with, they probably said, I want it on the google.com. I know you do, but we're going to have you somewhere else. And that's just how you have to, it's just your responsibility as a church communicator is to curate so that we're not putting too much in front of people. I mean, and we see this in so many areas of church communication announcements. I'm sure everyone wants more announcements. And so the minute you go beyond 3, we're losing people, right? And so it's the same thing with websites.
Talk to me a little bit about the navigation menu, because I know that the last church I was at, when we were building out the navigation of the menu, we only wanted a few options up top, but we couldn't figure out how everything fit into those few options without each of the options being so broad that nobody knew to click them to find what they're looking for. So tell me a little bit about, what do you recommend for navigation menus? How do you categorize things? What are people who are going to visit your website actually looking for?
Yeah, definitely. No, and I think I'm glad you touched on this, because this is one of the most important areas where I think where websites can become unusable, is that people try to get too creative with the menu, or they, like we've been talking about, they don't know when to say stop. And so you have this navigation menu that grows and grows and grows. And so I got a couple kind of golden rules I use for this. One is to avoid at all costs having more than 7 navigation items. The minute you get beyond 7, you're giving people too many choices now, where the option is no longer clear, because by the time I reach 8, 9, and 10, I'm forgetting what 1, 2, and 3 were, because I have something in my mind that I'm coming to do, like we talked about reaching a goal, and I'm trying to figure out which of those menu items is going to get me closest to getting that goal. So if you have about, I'm new, and services all in 3, I don't know which one to click on to get directions. But if you say I'm new, and that kind of covers a lot of our about stuff, and it covers our service times, that's my one I'm going to go to. So the more options you give people, you think you're helping them, but you're actually creating some confusion now as to which one I'm going to get to. And the other idea there is to sometimes it seems to be pastors for some reason who always love to think this is an opportunity to be creative, and it's not, where you want to say, hey, rather than saying ministries, let's call it, and they come up with some fancy word for it. And what you end up getting is what we call mystery meat navigation, where I don't know what this is going to taste like when I get in, but so I'll just dive in. The reality is people don't click on mystery navigation items because they don't have time. We're here to accomplish something in seconds. That's what we're used to doing on the web. So we're not going to sit back and say, oh, this is fun. This is a creative navigation. Let me just click on all these buttons and I'll open up tons of tabs and find out what's happening here. They just want to get it. If they can't find it quick, they're going to say, this website doesn't answer my problem, doesn't answer my question. And so I'm just going to pick up the phone and call, which now we've eliminated, part of what we were trying to do was make some efficiency, which is that we were trying to get them their answer really quick. We were trying to save a call into the church office. Maybe the office is closed when they're looking at it. And so we've removed what could have been a big win and made it this confusing process. So navigation goes a long way to making your website super easy to use. So even though it feels like kind of a nothing job, it might be one of the most important when you're thinking about making your website.
So I think we may be preaching to the choir a little bit here, because I think most people listening want to simplify the homepage. They want to simplify the navigation. They want to have clear call to action that lead to something like plan a visit or find out the information you need to watch us online. But
Mhm.
how can we have these conversations with the executive level leadership at our church? And how can we help them understand our logic behind this, rather than it's too cluttered or it's too busy or whatever else? What kind of conversations can we have to help them understand where we're coming from?
I think, I mean, even just listening to your podcast, listening to watching other YouTube videos, there's so much great information out there that I think if you come prepared for that conversation, and hopefully what they're getting from this conversation and others like it is lots of those little tidbits, like things like what I'll often do is show yahoo.com versus google.com and be like, which one do we want to be and which one worked? And I think bringing examples, bringing stats, just being prepared for that conversation, I think will go a really long way. So rather than just making the call, and this obviously every church communicator knows whether or not they've got the autonomy to just run with something, or do they have to answer for every decision. You're going to know who you are in this conversation, but if you have to answer for those and someone's going to be pushing back, come prepared for that conversation with the whys. And I think that's something that I and many others could help with if they do need it, where we can kind of equip them with different tools. And there's so much good information out there on this. So I think to just say, this is why we're doing this, and or maybe show great examples of other churches that have done this. Be like, this is who we want to be in this moment. But no, I know it can be tough conversations to have as to how do you tell people no, and probably one that everyone here is facing in different ways.
Right. So now that we've got somebody who's visiting our website and they're thinking about coming Sunday, but maybe they're on the fence, or maybe they're not available this weekend, or maybe their friend recommended it, or, they saw a new sign up and they wanted to find out what the sign was about and it happens to be for the church. How can we capture that person's information? And capture sounds violent, but that's not really what it means. How can we get a hold of their information so we can follow up with them? So maybe even if they don't visit this week, some information could help them visit next week. Or if they're not sure, then we could give them kind of a taste of what our church is like to get them more comfortable. What are some ways we can get our visitors information so that we can be proactive in following up with them?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. So I think one thing we want to do, so as we talk about our goals and the different things we want them to achieve, we want to line up some different strategic calls to action that will help get them there. So a great example you mentioned earlier is plan your visit, which is actually coming built in to Tidely sites. We actually, Dan Ermler and his team have come on board as well, which has been super exciting. And so we're going to have that built into all. And there's other services out there too that have kind of plan your visit type tools in there. But what that does is it helps give them a really obvious call to action. So this person who's just gauged it, they're like, oh, maybe I do want to come visit. And they're going to click through, and what you want your plan to visit tool to do is to ask really simple questions. We're not looking to dive deep in this moment. They just met us. It's a first date. We're not asking them about marriage or anything like that. We're just asking simple questions, which is, when might you be available to come? Oh, that's the day that works for you. Here's a service we have on a time on that day. Okay, can we grab your email address? We love to remind you, before the service or whatever. So just some really light stuff that way. And there's some other strategic stuff you could do. You could say top 10 events to do in our city, or things, top 10 ways we love our city. Click here to download our free poster or whatever. I mean, there's different little kind of in business, we call them lead generators. Right. But there are ways to just gather people's information. Or maybe you're saying, hey, sign up for our newsletter. We have tons of great community events happening. We'd love to have you come join us if you don't want to miss out on one, and to add subscribe to our newsletter here. So different ways to kind of capture that. One thing I want to just touch on is, it's funny if you had a retail store or whatever, or even let's just say if someone walks into the church on Sunday morning and slips as they're walking their way in, you're like, there was a puddle there, we have to mop that up and clean it up. Your website does not allow that luxury. You don't get to see when someone trips up, because you might say, hey, we've got a plan your visit tool there. It is failing us. No one's clicking on it. Let's get rid of it. What you don't know is that maybe there's a browser bug on there where it's not showing up for people with a certain browser, or it doesn't show up on mobile, or it's too far below the fold that, Gladys never actually scrolls all the way down to plan her visit because she doesn't realize websites scroll like that, or whatever it would be. You have a responsibility as the website maintainer to actually test it. So you want to bring in the people that you want to click that button and watch Gladys do it, because you're going to be like, okay, Gladys, you're coming to our website. We need you to go and plan your first visit. And you're going to watch what happens when she goes on there and tries to navigate, can't find the button, starts clicking on contact on navigation. You're like, I never thought she'd click on contact. That actually, right, you're probably thinking you have to call the office to plan your visit or whatever it would be. And so taking that bit of extra time goes a long way to knowing whether or not something works. Because I think too often in any aspect of life, we create something, it fails, and we think, oh, well, it didn't work. But really, you just missed the step of testing it and seeing how we can get them there. So same goes for saying we've got our baptism sign-up form on our website. We've got our small group sign-up form. Ask someone to go use it. Because that's what happens, right? You have an inspiring sermon on the value of small groups and what it means to be in community. Someone goes home that day and says, all right, you know what? I'm convinced. I'm going to sign up for a small group. They open up the website and they look at your navigation and they're like, I don't know where to click. I don't know what to do. And then that moment kind of fizzles, fades. They're like, I'll call the church. They're open Tuesday. I'll call the church, and then they forget and the moment's gone, right? But our website had an opportunity. So just to make sure those calls to action are not only clear, but actually that they work all the way through.
So I know that Plan a Visit is not a brand new thing, but relatively new as far as website world goes. And, you know, on my blog, we've got a pop-up that people can sign up and get something. And the average subscription is about 2% of visitors. And sometimes churches will look and say, oh, only 3% of people visiting our website are planning a visit. What are we doing so catastrophically wrong? This should be like 80%. And that's just not realistic. Do you have any numbers yet on the percentage or realistic benchmarks on the number of visitors compared to the number of people who are going to plan a visit?
That's a good question. So maybe went a little bit better for Dan Ermler, only because that was his product coming in. So we're going to get some numbers. So we're just rolling out Plan Your Visit as we speak. So we're going to get some more details on our side, but I'm sure Dan has a lot to that. The one interesting thing there that him and I are just working together on kind of planning the product out is he said that the majority of their actual visits planned come from their exit intent mode, which, as some of you know who've done any kind of lead generator tools, is when someone scrolls up to go close the window, you can catch that moment and pop something up. And so right as they're leaving, they'll pop up, hey, we'd love for you to come plan a visit. So it wasn't them clicking a button, it was us saying, hey, we saw you leaving, would you like to plan a visit? And so apparently the majority of the signups come from there, which I thought was really interesting. But yeah, I don't know. It could be a good conversation to have with Dan, or I'll come back on another episode and we'll chat through what.
Yeah, that'd be great. So churches, just so you know, in real media, blog world, business world, 2% is a realistic opt-in. What that means is if 100 people visit your website, probably 2% of them would actually sign up. So, what I would encourage you to do is, before you put all your eggs in one basket with your Plan a Visit and expect that this is going to be the new thing that brings 55 families through the door every week, figure out what those numbers are and set a realistic goal so that you're not surprised if you get a 3 or a 4% opt-in, because that's actually pretty impressive. So that's my 2 cents into the conversation.
That's good. I like it.
Matt, if somebody wants to connect with you, they have more questions about their website, or they're interested in learning more about Tithely websites, how can they get started? Where can they connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are best to find us right now through tithe.ly, just right through the website, and there'll be a sites option for you to find on there. And so you'll get all the information on kind of this new offering we've got. We're super excited at what we're offering. It's actually kind of mind blowing for me because, like I said, I've kind of been doing this for years now. And so coming on with Tithely, they've been able to offer our package. Is it okay if I mention this? We're doing a website setup fee for $149. That includes every single feature we've ever built over the course of the last 9 years.
Wow.
And then your ongoing fees are $19 a month. And that's your hosting, your support, your maintenance, the upgrades I was telling you about. And it also includes our sermon player, our email newsletter tool. So it's unbelievable, in my mind, what we're able to offer. And this all comes with a free Tithely giving account as well. So it's pretty exciting. But yeah, all the details will be on there. We'll have lots more coming out as we go here. But definitely check us out. We'd love to show you what we're offering.
That's incredible. $149 to set up and $19 a month. And you have a website specifically built for churches. You can't even go to a DIY website builder for that. and also it's then not built for your church. So not built with
Exactly.
churches in mind.
Yeah.
Matt, what about you personally? If somebody has a question for you, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
I'll give you my direct email. Actually, I'd be so happy for you to send me a note. I'd love to connect and answer any questions. Maybe as we've been talking, you kind of had some specifics come up that are problems you've been facing. So you can just reach me at matt.morrison@tithe.ly. Follow me on Twitter at Matt Morrison. Yeah, look me up. I'd love to chat.
Sounds good. Matt, thank you so much for hanging out today. It was an honor to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. I really appreciate it.
Hey, Tyler, just tell us a little bit about what the Engage conference is all about.
So the Engage conference is an online, completely free conference that we put together to help church leaders navigate the technology that is so necessary in today's world. But what we're finding is so many churches just lack the resources, the time, the energy, the money to be able to navigate all of the technology that's just so imperative for us to be able to reach people. And so we've brought some of the best minds in the church space and the technology space all coming together so that we can focus right around how do you implement technology inside the church so that you can reach more people in your community.
Perfect. Our listeners can sign up for free to the Engage conference at churchmarketingideas.com/engage. Thanks, Tyler.
Hi, Adam. I'm interviewing for a communication job at a church, and I wonder what questions you could recommend asking. Thanks for taking my question.
So a couple things here. The first thing is that sometimes we assume that because we're taking a job at a church that we already know some of the answers, and so we don't need to ask them. You know, maybe we know somebody who already works at that church, or maybe we go to that church and we are now being brought on staff. So we just make assumptions like we know what our schedule's like, and you know, we figure there's regular holiday time, and we know what our pay is going to be like. And I think all of those questions are important to get clear before you take the job. So ask things like, what is the expectation for my schedule? Will I have to work extra times at some point in time? What does that look like? Am I compensated for that time? Am I paid for that time? Is it comp days? So if I work an extra day on an extra Saturday because there's a funeral, does that mean I get to take an extra day off the following week? You know, you need to ask all those normal questions that we would ask at any other job, even if it wasn't a church job. So ask those normal questions, those typical questions. But one thing that I found that I think is a helpful conversation starter is to ask the question about how much of what I'm going to be doing is going to be told to me so that I can go and execute it. Like somebody's going to come to me and say, hey, I need a Facebook post. How do I handle that? Am I going to be told, am I going to be going and doing that Facebook post because I was told to? Or if somebody comes to me and says, hey, I need a Facebook post, do I have the leeway to say to them, well, that may not be the best way to communicate this, and so let's look at some other options. You know, am I there to execute, or am I there to have creative? Am I there to be the mechanism, the engineer of what needs to be communicated, or am I there to give input? Like, am I taking a VP of marketing type position, an executive level position where I get input on what and how things are named and communicated and those types of conversations? So what percentage of my job is mechanics and what percentage of my job is creativity? Like, you're bringing me on because we want something posted on our Facebook page every day, and if we say this has to go on Facebook, then this has to go on Facebook. Or are you bringing me on to say, hey, we've got this new series, how are we going to promote it? And you say, well, we could do this on Facebook, we could do this on email, and we could do this with Facebook ads, or we could do this on Instagram, or we could do this on YouTube. So the question really is, how much execution are you expected to do that's being told to you versus how much creative input do you have? And I think this is an important conversation that often gets overlooked, and it's way better to have this conversation during the job interview than it is to have that conversation after you're on staff. So have the conversation about what level of input, you know, if we're going to have a new program in the church, do I get to have input on how that's named because I then have to communicate it? Or am I just going to be told what's happening and then I go and figure out the way to promote it? Or am I going to be told what's happening and told how to promote it, and then I go about doing that thing? That's a really important conversation. and maybe even something that your pastor or your leader, whoever you're going to report to, hasn't even yet considered. Like maybe that hasn't even crossed their mind yet. And so I would really want to have a conversation about creative versus execution, aside from all of the other typical job things like salary and expectations and schedule and flexibility and holiday time and all those types of things. Now, we've created a blog post that's about a church job description, and a lot of the things that you're going to want in your church job description are things you're going to want to get clear in the interview. So it's going to be a valuable post for you. Just go to churchmarketingideas.com/interview, and you'll be able to figure out exactly what you need to ask during your church communications interview. Now, if you are listening and you have a question, just go to churchmarketingideas.com, click the button that says ask a question, and leave that question. I promise I will respond to every single question that comes in, and some of them will even appear right here on the podcast. Coming up on the next episode.
Word of mouth being outdated. People that probably feel that word of mouth advertisement is being outdated, they might not be supporting it with anything else. Maybe they're not currently inviting, so word of mouth isn't out there. It sounds good, but they're not practicing word of mouth advertising. I like to think of it as a movie, and so if you go see a good movie, you're telling all of your friends about it, and then before you know it, everybody's going to go see the movie just because you mentioned it to them, because you are a friend and your word has weight. And so, we're going to dive in a little bit to word of mouth advertising and making a personal invite and digital invite and what that looks like and why that is important. But I'll be the first to tell you too that I don't think print advertising is dead. I know a lot of people are, let's just jump all in on digital. I think that's great, but I think that the two can support one another. And again, you define what is print, and it's so much more than just an invite card or a mailer.